Hello everyone, this is Taha Sajid. Welcome to the show. Mr. Vivek Ramachandran. Vivek's impact on Wi-Fi and browser security is unmatched. Do you have any segue to get into those applications?
So SquareX's connector can actually expose all of those within the browser itself. Give that user or group access to those private app IP addresses or however you want to define it.
Let's talk about what everyone is talking about. How does this agent can help in order to detect those events happening?
So you can deploy SquareX with a policy to block all of those, and if that happens, the user technically can't change anything on a page.
So could you share more on these attacks and their implications?
Also, today any third-party developer can go about creating an application of his own.
And then there is another set of people who are newly coming into security.
Absolutely makes sense. That's what we need today.
Hello everyone, this is Taha Sajid. Welcome to the show, Security Pulse. So today we have with us Mr. Vivek Ramachandran. He's a legendary cybersecurity innovator and a founder of SquareX, a browser-native security startup backed by Secure Capital, and previously, which is training thousands across 90 plus countries before its acquisition by INE. From discovering the cafe latte attack to speaking at Black Hat and DEF CON, Vivek's impact on Wi-Fi and browser security is unmatched. I'm really pleased to have with me Mr. Vivek. So thank you for being with us.
Yeah, thanks so much, Taha. Super happy to be on the podcast. Thank you so much for the invite and excited to speak with you.
I'm glad. So Vivek, I think we can start from the very beginning to how does the idea of SquareX came to you? Because I know you have been working in the cybersecurity space for like several years before that, and you started this pen tester academy. Where you've been training. So, what has made you switch from that training and education journey towards starting something of your own? So, tell me something about it.
Yeah. So when I ran Pen Tester Academy, we used to spend a lot of times with red teams and security teams. Primarily teaching them how attackers would break in, and that's something. When you do a lot of it, you try to also figure out like what are the newer techniques. So Pen Tester Academy had like a lot of Fortune 500 companies, all the top US banks, and all of them as customers. And that's really where their red teams were starting to tell me that they were seeing more and more attacks happen via the browser. Because if you think about it, right now, 90% of everything we do is in the browser. At this time, even this StreamYard session is happening entirely through the browser.
True.
So attackers have figured this out as well. And a lot of browser-native attacks like identity, hijacks, OAuth, SAML, browser in the middle, adversary in the middle, DLP bypasses, malicious browser extensions, whatnot. All of these plague the browsers, and fewer attacks now go down to the endpoint because your local apps are SaaS apps, your local storage is SaaS storage, and that's really where I think following the attackers is very, very important, because that's how you can protect enterprises. So based upon that, this whole idea came in is, look, if the browser is the new endpoint, then you need a security product which can live entirely in the browser, be browser native and browser first class citizen. And that's how SquareX was born.
Nice, very interesting. And you really made a interesting point on thinking from the attacker's mindset and checking what attacks are like can be more exploited, and then to build the solution from there. I really love that. And this is actually what we have been doing as well, at Security Pulse. So talking about the solutions, the product, we know like there is a browser detection and response, product which we have been, which we have founded like recently. So, in terms of the use cases, if you have to pinpoint, what are the top use cases, what you are trying to solve for, and is there any particular industry that you are targeting within those use cases?
Yeah. So if I were to go ahead and bunch the use cases, the very first one, of course, is the whole attack detection mitigation piece. And that's really where we look at identity attacks, malicious browser extensions, malware downloads and whatnot. And the second bunch of use cases is DLP in the browser. So everybody has data leakage prevention on the endpoint as well as in the cloud. But unfortunately today within the browser, DLP is entirely broken. And this is really where, users routinely may upload things to their personal OneDrive or their personal Google Drive, company documents, confidential data and whatnot. And much of this goes absolutely undetected. So that's the second use case bucket, which is browser DLP, where we extend the capabilities of existing DLP products into the browser. Now, the last piece is what we call private app access. And this is the classic enterprise browser use cases where, if you have a very big data center deployment, AWS, GCP, Azure, and you have internal applications sitting inside that, which today can only be accessed via a remote desktop or a Citrix installation, then SquareX can actually go about exposing that into the user's browser without you having to go ahead and invest in such a big Citrix or remote desktop establishment. Now, industry-wise, I think attack detection mitigation, almost anyone who worries about their employees getting targeted online is a customer. The DLP piece, I think, most organizations who have DLP deployments and want to extend that within the browser are people that we service. The last part is primarily super large enterprises, Fortune 500, where they probably want to replace their Citrix or remote desktop installation. Something which is more lightweight, cost effective, those would be customers.
Nice. Very interesting. So there is a use case, as you were telling me about the Citrix connectivity, that reminded me of my time in Comcast. So in our security design, if I may call it, and give some insights, to how this is very relevant. So we were having a bunch of users who are doing the managed services onto the products, right? And somebody of them are sitting in India or in other parts of the world, and they want to access the data centers because the application what you are having for Telecom are based on the data centers compute. Yeah. So if they have to access, they have to come through VPN. But before coming to the VPN, they were going to their Citrix server, and their Citrix were having that connectivity towards the VPN endpoint. And that is how some of them are coming. And once they are landing into the data center, they are getting into the jump box, and from there they are running sort of commands towards the end and applications, and other piece of the or other set of users who are directly coming from the VPN clients, and they are getting into Azure virtual desktop, and that is the last point for them before they reach to the application. So what we have noticed is this whole journey is very it has a lot of attack surfaces, and it has a lot of hops before getting into the application, and including security measures and risk assessment into all these hops takes a lot of time and resources, right? So we were looking for something which we can use, which can allow the users to directly connect to that end applications, and we should have a secure tunnel towards it, right? So this use case, what you were just explaining me earlier, has a potential solution for that problem.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and that is exactly the use case that people want private app access, because having used it, you know how painful it is to go through a box, the latency problems, the fact that, if the user is moving or traveling, then makes it horrible as an experience for him to get any work done. And I think, so these technologies are fairly old and arcane, and this is really where now the browser is performant enough that with the right piece of machinery in the cloud, it's possible for us to give access to these internal apps directly, versus you having to log into a Citrix box, from there hop onto a jump box and all of this roundabout things. So
just to add on something here, you also mentioned about so in that solution, when we were exploring some alternatives, to solve these problems, there were some options which we are getting from other vendors. For example, Zscaler has their has a solution where you can use their Zia platform to get an isolated access, and everything will be filtered from that Zia towards that. You can have either their private cloud setup, which is their or if you're using their SaaS like application, they have also some products for that as well. So in terms of your value proposition to what you are bringing as per your competitors, or similarly to what others doing, where do you see where's the differentiation?
Yeah. So I mean, with ZIA or ZPA and a bunch of other options, unfortunately, that is nothing but corporate VPN. And same problems with any form of traffic pipe is there are latency issues, problems. There are locations where probably something like a ZPA may not even work because there is a firewall in between. You're sitting at the airport where some things don't work behind a captive portal, and all of a sudden you can't access enterprise resources. So I think both of these approaches, which is the whole Citrix approach of a remote desktop and the whole ZTNA approach of you going ahead and using like an entire data pipe or a corporate VPN, this is what we call as the previous generation of solutions. And at one point, this was required simply because you couldn't do much in the browser. Browsers were simple website renderers. That's it, right? And this is really where Taha, the way what we are doing is rather than increase latency, our perspective is look, all you need is access to those apps. And SquareX deploys a connector in the customer data center, which tunnels back to ours. So now anytime you want to access an app, we can go ahead, control switch you just to that app, rather than you having to have a full data pipe like a VPN or a remote desktop instance. So with what SquareX has browser natively, this is super fast, low latency, allows you to go ahead and access this pretty much across any network because we only use a regular WebSocket, and that is allowed no matter which firewall or anything you're using, because it just tunnels through the same set of ports. It'll work, from an airport, it'll work anywhere. So I think in today's hybrid world where everybody's traveling, there is so much of hybrid devices where you have your personal device and whatnot. It's no longer feasible to have such heavy duty solutions running and requiring the user to go ahead and to have like even more increased latency. And that's really where we've been able to capitalize. This is the next gen evolution of private app access, which was previously a VPN only or a remote desktop Citrix only access.
Got it. Very interesting. So looking at some of the use cases and some of the areas, so there is clearly anybody who's using a web app, this is the product for them. And it is not only about latency and those things, but it has also been effective in trying to withstand and detect and prevent that access, right? Because you have been like kind of reverse engineering your way into your solution, in which you are first understanding the attack vectors, the exploit surface, and then you are providing those solutions.
Yeah.
So looking at the other apps, for example, there are containerized applications which is running in infrastructure, right? And there are different abstractions layer that we can think of, which is running on top of those computes, right? So do you have any or segue to get into those applications for your products, or is there anything which is coming which we don't know about it?
Yeah, I think if you have internal apps which can only be accessed via SSH, RDP, some custom protocols, you have mainframes. So SquareX's connector can actually expose all of those within the browser itself, and we have a very custom interface through which it can be done. So let's say you're a developer and you want to access an internal IP address, this is your Kubernetes cluster. All you have to do is in the SquareX admin terminal, give that user or group access to those private app IP addresses or however you want to define it. And the connector actually allows you to kind of go about, proxying multiple different protocols with ease. And that's how we've been able to do coverage beyond just web apps in the client data center.
Got it. Very interesting. And in terms of the design of that connector, Vivek, do you have any like recommendation? For example, it can be a daemon set, it can be
it's actually custom built at our end, because to be able to kind of reverse proxy many of these protocols is non-trivial. So that's really where the whole connector is a VM which has a lot of secret sauce applications that we custom built, and that's how we are able to kind of go ahead and in a way, kind of like proxy all of this different tier traffic, web, SSH, RDP, whatever you might actually have.
Nice.
And that's the innovation. That is one of the innovations in the private app access piece that the company has done.
Got it. And in terms of the key performance indicators, in terms of getting the data out, as well as any impact that is happening on the underlying infrastructure, do you have any like recommendations, or in your view, when you deploy those agents, like through a VM, and if those detections are being taking place and getting the data out, what is the like CPU memory utilization we can expect to be raised, due to that?
Yeah, I mean, SquareX deploys as a browser extension on any browser. And this is really where, because we leverage technologies like WebAssembly, which run at native speed, these are the same technologies today that your Adobe Online, Figma, Canva, all of those video, image editing software and all of that use within the browser. So this is meant to be highly performant, run super fast at native speeds, and this is what SquareX leverages. So because of that, you're extremely lightweight. You probably wouldn't see any single-digit percentage point rise. Also, browsers do some optimizations, which is, let's say right now you have 50 tabs open. The browser puts, apart from background processes, to sleep in all the other tabs. So in reality, SquareX is just monitoring the active tab the user is working on and asynchronous threads which may be running on the other browser tabs. So there are a lot of optimizations which end up happening, which makes this super lightweight.
Nice, interesting. So let's now move gears and let's talk about what everyone is talking about these days. I mean, GenAI. So
Yes.
In terms of the GenAI use cases, let's say if I want to, if there are multiple GenAI apps open, web apps open in web browser, and if I am, let's say, using any prompts to do, let's say, like redirect the response, or to inject some prompts, like doing a prompt engineering attack, for example, using web browser. So how does this agent can help in order to detect those events happening, or is there any way that you can think of which the agents can help us in order to prevent such attacks?
So I think because we run on every user's end browser, we can monitor, look at every data, we can block it, we can modify, we can do a bunch of stuff. And this is really where, you can even harden the browser with a lot of directives that we support via GPOs, where you could basically say that, look, the developer tools module on any browser should be blocked when it comes to ordinary users of your enterprise. So a lot of times what tends to happen is the only way that the user can make those modifications and all is if he has access to the developer tools tab, or he has a browser extension which can inject and make changes. So you can deploy SquareX with a policy to block all of those. And if that happens, the user technically can't change anything on a page. So he can't go ahead and do things like interception. We can even block addition of local proxies and things like that. And that's the way we can completely go ahead and jail him to just use whatever is the base GenAI application that the enterprise provides, rather than be able to do injections and things like that.
Nice. And Vivek, you gave a talk recently on data splicing attacks and besides San Francisco, that how data can be even when the traffic is monitored. So could you share more on these attacks and their implications?
Yeah. So I think the whole enterprise establishment today depends on DLP in a very big way, from a compliance perspective, policy enforcement perspective. And it's almost like a 101 of security, right? If you don't have anything, you probably still have DLP. But what's been happening is that enterprise users are largely going ahead and bypassing DLP policies within the browser, because now browsers have become extremely performant. There are so many different protocols and whatnot. So I'll give you an example is a proxy-based DLP requires a URL to be put in, and only based upon that can it block certain workflows. But the URL for Google Drive drive.google.com is the same for your individual Google Drive as well as for enterprise. So the problem is a URL domain-based blocking does not work properly anymore because you don't know properly now if this is going to your personal or your corporate OneDrive. Now, some of these SASE SSE secure web gateways have probably hard-coded for some applications, but it's fairly easy to evade. Also, endpoint DLP does not have visibility into the browser simply because there are very few APIs the browser exposes for you to tap into DLP. And this is really where what we showed is that a proxy-based DLP can be fully bypassed by an insider threat, where he can upload all of this to his servers absolutely undetected by using channels like WebRTC, WebSocket, gRPC, server-side pushes, etc., which most of these technologies today, SASE, SSE proxies can't even monitor. So I think the talk was received in a pretty big way. A lot of enterprises were concerned that their existing solutions, unfortunately, were totally broken when it comes to all this. So I think that was what the talk was about. And really the whole underscoring was that you require browser native security, without which your DLP in the enterprise is today fundamentally broken.
Nice. So Vivek, this is super interesting for me because we have been, there's a lot of customers that what we have been working with. They are having the similar issues, kind of. They have too much security controls, like their DLP is broken, and they don't want and they don't know where to spend their money on, because they don't have any other like alternatives. Now, coming to the like roadmap, if I would ask you for your product, you mentioned about like the GenAI solution, what you're giving, and the data splicing attack, maybe like for the DLP. But is there anything which you are having in your roadmap as a focus point, which is more relevant to the attacks these days?
So one of the big things organizations grapple with is there are so many of these GenAI applications right now, very well-known ones like ChatGPT, Claude, etc. But also today, any third-party developer can go about creating an application of his own on a brand new domain, where this is also nothing but ChatGPT, but with a backend API integration. So I think organizations are grappling with users violating intellectual property rights and everything. So a standard one which we've seen is right before a meeting, many employees will upload certain company confidential documents to quickly get a summary so they don't have to read through the whole document. But the problem is they end up uploading this to their personal version of ChatGPT or Gemini or whatever they're using. And if they do this, then unfortunately, because it's a personal edition, those LLMs will actually train on this data.
Exactly.
And this leads to a big company data leakage. So SquareX has very granular GenAI, functions, policies, rules, etc., that we're now starting to create, where as an organization, you can monitor all GenAI interactions that the user is having across the organization, show you that entire threatscape, and all of that. So this is something pretty big on the roadmap, apart from, of course, things like attack detection, mitigation, etc.
I've been in the RSA just a couple of months back. I think it was in last month, and there was a lot of solutions. There's a lot of companies pitching in GenAI security. Either they want to harden the LLMs, or they want to restrict the access of those LLMs to some like limited people, right? So one of the interesting quote that I heard is that like LLM is not the solution for every problem, right? You have to first of all pick and choose where you want to use the LLM. That is like the fundamental thing. Now, talking about the prevention and the detections, what do you think? If you'll be able to use, let's say, your product, where in the risk score you would see the overall risk coming into, like going in for LLM. So, like what are the top risk? Like if I have to rephrase, like what are the top risks you think that would be avoided using a product?
I think the biggest one is data leakage prevention into LLMs, which was, single direction, employees uploading data, putting up proprietary stuff, putting up P2 information and all of that. Now, on the other side is things like ensuring that you don't yourself end up violating copyrights, code copyrights and whatnot. So an example is, imagine today that your developer team has access to ChatGPT, they're prompting them to write code, and then they copy and put that code into your product, which you're building. And right now the courts aren't fully decided whether some of this could be viewed as copyright violation, of the folks on which the LLM has actually trained. So data will flow bidirectional, data that is entered into LLMs, and then the LLM's response that the user ends up using within the enterprise. And these are the two different choke points that SquareX can sit in front of, and you can now decide via your policies what can or cannot happen. So the simple example, you can deploy a policy which says no source code can be copied out of the browser. So now let's say somebody opens up ChatGPT, tells it to write a piece of code, copies it in the clipboard. The clipboard copy won't work because SquareX will actually block that. So now the user can no longer be able to copy that out and paste it in a local ID. The second one is file download. So let's say the user says, okay, you know what, I can download the code as a file. That's something we can block in the browser. Now, I know there are other ways that a developer could probably, through command line do it. But that's really where your endpoint DLP and all that should come in. But within the browser itself, we provide a very rock solid, caged up environment when it comes to bidirectional data flow in LLMs, and you decide what's allowed or disallowed.
So if I'm thinking from the user's perspective, Vivek, let's say if I don't want to copy it, right? If I'll be just using my phone, just doing a snapshot of the page, and sending a WhatsApp message. So there are ways of doing it. So is there any way or is there any method that you think there is still work needs to be done on this, and what's there, right?
I think cybersecurity has always been like a very layered approach, and that's really where if depending on how critical your data. So as a simple example, let's say this is a call center at Walmart, and those call center employees can actually view people's credit cards, P2 information, their addresses, social security, whatever it may be, right? So for such an environment, I think physical security becomes more important before digital security. Exactly the scenario which you mentioned. A call center employee cannot be allowed, and you kind of find that in call centers which do for banks and other places, employees would have to put their phones outside in a locker and lock it up. They won't be allowed to bring in the phone in front of a computer. So I would say security is a layered approach depending on what is inadmissible. So in most organizations, a slap on the wrist where you tell a developer, you know what, you're not supposed to copy this code out and paste it. We are blocking it in the browser. Don't do this. This is disallowed. It really works, and the developer should not do it from the command line as well, because he knows this is against the organization policy, and if he gets caught, he's going to get fired. Now, if the concern is that he should not be able to do it, even if, no matter what the condition, then now you require a much more granular layer by layer deterrent in the browser, in the endpoint, in your GitHub, right? Wherever code is being entered, at that point in time, you're doing checks and whatnot. So I would say where SquareX shines is today the browser, when it comes to giving enterprise visibility that doesn't exist. The browser is a big blind spot at this point, and we cover that. But depending on your use case and data security concerns, there are definitely other controls outside the browser, maybe even in the physical environment, that you would have to add, depending on where your concerns are.
Nice. And in terms of the other venues like mobile apps, do you have any, is there like work going on that domain as well?
Yeah, so mobile applications, mobile devices, unfortunately, the monopoly that Apple and Google have, there are very few security products that can run natively on it. What SquareX can actually do is, if this is a managed mobile device, then you can go ahead and deploy SquareX in your default browser. So no matter what the user ends up opening, SquareX is protecting it. Now, on an unmanaged device, you can integrate SquareX into your IDP as a custom IDP factor. So when the user, whether on a mobile device or on a laptop, which is BYOD, tries to access something, then at that point in time, we block it unless certain things aren't true about that environment. So that's the way we solve it on mobile devices, managed and unmanaged.
Nice. Very interesting. And Vivek, I heard something about the Year of Browser Bugs initiative. So that
Yeah.
SquareX has launched it. Can you share more about it and some of the research findings?
Yeah. So I think where we took inspiration from is almost, if I remember, 15, 20 years back, there were a lot of software browser bugs which were being found. And unfortunately, at that point in time, browser vendors were not fixing the software bugs fast enough. So HD Moore and a couple of guys came up with this whole little thing called month of browser bugs, where they said every month we will put out a software vulnerability in all the popular browsers to shame them to start to fix it. Now, where did we take inspiration? I think at this point, browser vendors are fixing software bugs, but unfortunately, they aren't providing enough controls to stop application layer attacks happening in the browser. And this is really where the Year of Browser Bugs, the whole initiative was inspired by the month of browser bugs, with a key difference that we aren't focused on software vulnerabilities. Instead, we are focusing on application layer vulnerabilities, architectural issues in browsers, and exposing those to let enterprises know that, hey, look, your browser is actually a consumer application, which you are using in the enterprise thinking it has enterprise-grade security, which is not true at all.
Yeah.
And that's really where you need a layer of enterprise security products to solve it. So examples of things that we discovered, browser sync jacking, polymorphic extensions, browser native ransomware. Previously we had even put out attacks against secure web gateways and whatnot. And the whole idea, Taha, with all of this is, hey, the browser is just a simple consumer app. It doesn't have security guardrails. If you think you're fully protected against application layer attacks and browser architecture vulnerabilities, you aren't. And because your entire enterprise user base uses the browser to access everything, a browser session or anything getting compromised means the keys to your kingdom are compromised.
Of course. Yeah, true. Very well said. And I mean, congratulations on this initiative, and I think this is really the need of an hour, and I would like to really see how we can collaborate also on this, because we do have a research lab as well, where we kind of do research on some of the attacks that are targeting national infrastructure. So things like attacks like Salt Typhoon, Wall Typhoon, SK Wireless, all those kind of attacks. We are kind of providing seeing how we can create detection, create innovative detection mechanism and prevention scheme as well. So yeah, definitely there's a good opportunity here. Lastly, Vivek, there is so you mentioned about application attack. You already have covered all those attacks, but there is there any other version of let's say a cross-site scripting or a new version of that which is coming out of the GenAI tools, which needs serious attention?
I think some of the older attacks like XSS, etc., have slowly started to die out, and the big reason is most XSS attacks were depending on the fact that via JavaScript you can read the cookie, and then you can send the cookie over to a remote site. Some cases, of course, you can do actions on behalf of the user, but what's been happening is now with HTTP only cookies and things like that, session hijacking via cookies is starting to become more and more difficult. Instead, attackers are replacing those with new age attacks like OAuth consent grant, SAML hijacking, device ID phishing, adversary in the middle, browser in the middle. So I think even though some of those older attacks exist, but in a very limited form these days, while the focus is starting to go more towards identity attacks, malicious browser extensions, and all of those. So we do have checks and balances for them, but we found that attackers have pivoted more towards these new generation attacks and are kind of moving away from this age-old CSRF, XSS, and all of that.
Nice, interesting. And anyway, you have been in this industry for more than 2 decades now. I mean, right? Yeah. So in terms of the evolution of the cyber attacks and the creation of threat intelligence, like the groups, and the role of other organizations like MITRE, CISA in the US, So, do you think, or what is your view on the collaboration on the threat intelligence and like in terms of educating different organizations across various domains for such attacks, and is there any areas for improvement you see that they should be there? So you have this initiative going on, and so is there any other initiative that you think is are needed in terms of making this whole threat intelligence more robust and uh, more collaborative in nature?
I think what you're probably going to require is a very layer specific framework which is governed by people working in that layer. Now, what do I really mean by that? So if you look at MITRE or the older OWASP top 10, all of that back in the day, see, the problem really is the guys who run it, they have expertise probably in like 3 or 4 areas, right? Including some external collaborators. So if today you go to the MITRE framework and you say that you want to talk about mobile network attacks, there is nobody in the MITRE framework team who would even understand A or Z of it, right? So what happens is always any framework gravitates towards the people maintaining the framework because that's what they love, that's what they think about. Also, what's been happening, Taha, is look, every technology layer is getting more and more denser. What I mean by that is, I remember 20 years back, you could read up enough about network security, endpoint security, and almost know 70 to 80% of what is out there. Today, that is impossible to do. Today, I tell you, there would probably be like only 10 people in the world who may know browser security at the level of granularity that some of the attackers targeting browsers would. Similarly, endpoint security, right? Malware, ransomware, all of these have become oceans. So even though I agree to the fact that this threat intel sharing and all of that is amazing, the fact is if you're still depending on people to consume all of that information and secure an organization, it just isn't feasible. What is the size of an average security team in an organization, right? Even really big ones, probably 10, 15, 20 people. Very rare is banks which are exceptionally large security teams. So my 2 cents is we need category level, kind of frameworks which are maintained by people who are obsessed about that layer rather than more generic frameworks. The second thing is threat intel is okay, but you finally need to go ahead and get the right products because I'll tell you, on an average day, we are putting in maybe 10 to 15 newer, kind of detections for attacks which just came out. Now, imagine that your security layer has 6 or 7 such products, which means like 100 new things to learn every day.
Yeah. And there are 2 school of thoughts, or what I have seen. One is the enterprise security gurus who are sitting there for like ages, and they think that they know everything. And then there are other set of people who knows the technology, which is like the data science, blockchain, like AI, all those things. So they think that people who are coming into, or who are bringing those new tools and technologies, whatever they have been, like the enterprise security, what they have been doing and what has been working for them will work for that as well. So there's that school of thought. And then there is another set of people who are newly coming into security, and they have basically the product experience, and then they are building up their cybersecurity skills on top of their product expertise, and they are like claiming themselves to be an expert of certain, let's say, A field versus B field. So those set of 2 people, when they meet inside an organization, there will be a friction, and at the end, what happens is the security risk are getting higher, in terms of the controls, and you are spending a lot of like budget into security, and there's a lot of meetings going on. But if you look at the recent attacks, how they have evolved, you will see a drastic increase on that. So we have to think through that, how what improvements we need to do on the enterprise security side of house team who are doing the security, and how we can bridge the gaps between the guys who are coming in and who are bringing in the domain expertise versus cybersecurity technologies, and how as a collaborative effort, whoever is setting up the framework should have those focus groups depending on the technology, that how they can bridge the overall framework into these subdomains as well.
Yeah, absolutely makes sense. That's what we need today.
Yeah, thank you, Vivek. I think it's been a pleasure having you, and I have myself learned a lot from you. I'm sure our audience have really enjoyed our conversation, and the kind of topics that you are bringing in is really the need of an hour, and I really believe and see there is a lot of potential with the kind of products you're bringing in, and which is really solving the problem. The thing which I don't understand, even if I have attended this RSA conference, there's a hundreds of cybersecurity vendors who are pitching up, zero trust, AI security, all those buzzwords, but the actual problem is still there. If we have so much competitiveness, and then why there are so many attacks happening these days? So I really appreciate your efforts, and I really wish all the best to you and your team in this journey. And any final thoughts before we go, Vivek, on your next roadmap item, or the kind of collaboration which you're looking to see from the industry?
Yeah, I think thanks, I think it was a pretty amazing discussion. I think from our side, of course, I just tell your viewers to watch SquareX.com. We keep putting out a lot of exciting research. Literally next week, you will see a very big press release in YOBB from our side, talking about browser AI agents and how attackers are subverting AI agents today. So yeah, we'll keep publishing a lot of great stuff, so your viewers can go ahead, look at our site, look at our blog, keep up with the latest.
Yeah, and just to add on to this initiatives, there is a good work going on in the telecom security world space as well. When there's a good research going on 6G networks, that how the AI native architecture would work and how the security would work. And I think browser detection and response solution, this is you are actually cutting down different hops, and you are cutting down different security control. This would be something to look for. So I think I would be definitely interested in watching your shows and learning more about your solution and how we can use that to solve some of the telecom security challenges.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, would love to collaborate. Yeah, thank you so much, Sar. It was a great discussion.
Yeah, thank you. All right, guys, thank you for coming to the show, for watching the show. If you have any comments, please feel free to leave your comments on the chat window, and Vivek is reachable on LinkedIn. If you want to know more about SquareX, please feel free to reach out to him. Until next time, take a very good care of yourself, and remember always, cybersecurity is not optional, it's a necessity. It's rephrase, remember, cybersecurity is not anymore optional, it should be must. Okay, take care. Bye.